for inviting me today. So yeah, I didn't have slides on because I didn't really have time to prepare. So just to introduce everyone, my name is Tanva Mahiti Vanitra. You just call me Tanva because my last name is way too long. So I'm a partner at Grant Thornton, as A mentioned. I advise clients mainly on the corporate law and tax side. So we deal with large companies as well as startups, and through various stages of their life. We do joint ventures, mergers, acquisitions, etc., etc. So on the personal side, I also enjoy investing into various businesses and watching them grow. So I've invested into some tech startups and some more traditional business as well, F&B, in the fintech startup space, logistics, etc. But generally, I just try to give them some guidance and let the guys who are much smarter than me run the show. Yeah. So yeah, so that's myself.
Thank you. And folks, as always, keep the questions coming. And Kuntanva is very humble. He's actually been instrumental in saving many startup lives from driving themselves off the cliff, myself included. Now, I guess for a lot of entrepreneurs that are coming from abroad, we have a lot of folks from Malaysia in the house today, but the program spans across the world. Actually, we've got teams from the US, Europe, that are trying to do business in Asia Pacific, particularly in Thailand. So if you had about 3 things you could advise people to must do, like to set up in Thailand properly, what would you advise them?
I would suggest you get an attorney. not because I'm trying to create work for myself. I went to school in the US, right? As you know, I grew up in Singapore. I stayed in the States for like 15 years. So I understand, coming to Thailand, I would just say briefly, when I first came back, it's an adjustment. Yeah, it's an adjustment for even when I speak Thai, and I can't even imagine for people who don't speak the language, what kind of adjustment that is. For our friends in Malaysia or Singapore who are familiar with the way things work in Southeast Asia, it might be less of an adjustment, but still an adjustment all the same. So my first advice is that you really look at the landscape, look at how you would want to enter into the picture. So a lot of times the business owners, entrepreneurs, they know their business model. They know it backwards and forward. They know the tech that they're bringing in, right? They know what they want to do, how to grow it, how to market it. But I would just say, take some time, breathe. You want to grow and you're used to working in a very high paced environment. But in countries like Thailand, for example, you come to Thailand or you go to Cambodia, I think even Vietnam, the bureaucracy is quite different, right? And the pace of life, I would say, is slightly different to what you're used to. So I have people coming in and say, I want to set everything up, and I think I want to grow X amount and get my staff on the floor within 3 months. I am telling you, go easy. You'll be lucky if you know where your company would be situated, what structure it is. Get things up, get your first hire in 3 months. I say you need to break out the bottle of champagne. So be realistic about your timeline. I know you're under pressure to grow, but really you don't want to come in and then have a whole list of issues coming after. So for people who are not familiar with countries like Thailand, we do have a rather protective regime. It's not like a free trade country like Singapore or in Hong Kong or many countries. So there are foreign business laws that restrict participation of foreign investors. So as a foreign investor or startup coming in, you have to think about how you would want to structure yourself properly, so you don't trip yourself, in 5 months down the line when you find that, hey, I don't have the proper permits, I don't have the proper structure, and how I'm going to reverse everything now. Okay.
Interesting. And I
think that's one.
Yeah, that's 2 more.
Okay, two more. Two more. I would say that if you must find the right partner and take time. Really, don't rush into it. I've seen people come in and they say, oh, I need to find a local partner. I'll give myself, 1 or 2 months to find. You really need to know, um, who's suitable for you, who is the right match for you. A lot of times, what you have the know-how, you have the technology, you have the finance behind you coming in, but you need to think about what partners you need here. People who can open doors, people who can get the market for you, or people already with uh, a business that is a synergy to what you're doing, and those things takes time. So I really encourage people to really take time. You might feel that, oh my God, I'm wasting a year trying to put everything together. That's a year well spent. I wouldn't say wasted. It's an investment. Invest in the relationship, invest in understanding our landscape. If you come to Thailand, a lot of people from our neighboring countries, and you look at our shopping malls, have you ever noticed why there are no foreign shopping malls here? All the Thais we know, we want to shop like the Daimarus and the Isetans, and they're all gone, right? There is a reason why. Our market is a bit different. The appetite is different. The understanding the consumer here is very important, right? Just because it works somewhere else doesn't mean that it will get adopted here. So really understand the market, and a good partner will be able to guide you through the process and give you that reality check, okay? And finally, the third one, I would say that when you plan your structure, you don't try to start light first. Yeah, a lot of people come in and they want to put in all the heavy assets and everything all at one time. Explore alternatives. Look at rep offices that you can set up easily, and if things don't work out the way you think, you can exit easily. One thing we tell our clients: setting up a company, I can set it up for you, within the week, as long as you pay me my fees. But if you want to close your company, well, you're going to be paying a lot of fees, because it might take almost a year to close it out. So you don't want to be tied down with administrative matters that you want to get out, and this thing has been kind of tying you down for the next 2 years. So I would say those are the three main things. Yeah.
Very fascinating, and it segues into the first question. We just heard from previous speakers that
Yeah.
these entrepreneurs want to land in Thailand. BOI is the way to do it. Is that
yes.
really the case? When should you choose a BOI and not? And for a lot of entrepreneurs here, they may qualify, they may not. They're a lot in impact.
Right.
They're trying
Yeah.
to change the world. I think I'm not sure if their categories have been updated. So can you give us any insights on structuring?
Yeah, I think the government has been trying to push, even with and COVID-19 has exacerbated it, and they're really pushing out new incentives, and they're focusing on the EEC, which is the Eastern Economic Corridor. Now, I wouldn't go into the detail of those, that structure or what policy it is, but I would just briefly say that investment promotion, as I mentioned, we have a foreign business law here that pretty much limits participations of foreign businesses for certain protected industries for Thai persons. Now, the BOI is one way to kind of circumvent that, in a way that if you get a promotion, you may be allowed to hold your company 100% or foreign majority held. So when you think about BOI, everybody thinks it's nice to have. Yes, I would say it's nice to have, but there is a burden of compliance. Um, you know, that's life. You get perks, and there's cost to it. You need to think whether it makes sense for you. For instance, a lot of you might be in the service industries because you're startups, right? Tech startups. Services, for example, under the Thai foreign business law, is blanket restricted against foreign participation. Don't ask me why. And that's the way it is for the last 30 years. So as a startup entity, you could go for a BOI, and which will allow you to hold a company foreign held or 100% foreign held, which is great. even for Thai startups, I sometimes advise them to consider BI option, because when they go for fundraising, if the funds comes from overseas, you can't tell your investors that, hey, you're pumping all the money, but the most you can hold is 49%. It's good to have, okay? You need to think about why you want the BOI. For example, foreign legal restrictions. If you go for that, that's good. You have to think about what type of investment promotions you want, because some of them that gives a lot of perks, like tax holidays, tax incentives, etc., will come with a lot of demands. They require deep tech, or they require that the relevant, the Ministry of Digital Economy has to, approve your project, and that could take like 6 months. So you might not want to wait that long to just get the BOI. So think about the pros and cons. For instance, for some promotion, like if you're doing like a platform, just a platform, you don't need to have the Ministry of Digital Economy to approve it. That shortens the time frame, but you don't get the tax holiday. But if you're thinking that, well, who cares about the tax holiday? I'll be at loss position for 3 or 4 years. All I want is the foreign business ownership. Then fine, apply for the BOI. One caveat about BOI is that they're recently, of late, they are a bit slow in the approval process. Understandably, because they're short, they're short of manpower. So they have a department and a section that consists of 3 or 4 persons who is reviewing all the tech industries, startups for the entire country. So there's a big backlog there as well.
Gotcha. So get early and get good lawyers. But is it worth it to do the applications yourself, or it's probably a pain in the butt?
You can. I wouldn't say that you have to hire me or somebody comparable to do it. It's possible to do it, and there are BOI's offices overseas. I believe in the States there is one in Tokyo. There's one in Singapore. I think there's one in Shanghai. So they have BOI offices overseas. So if you can check on their website and see if they have a local office there. And if they do, it's very useful to walk through with the representative there. It's not so complex that you can't do it yourself. Some companies would want an outsource to do it because they have too much things going on and they don't have the manpower to do the paperwork. So I would say that, to be fair, you can apply for it if you want, but it's a learning curve, right? If you're willing to do that, it's like filling out government form.
Sounds good.
It's
now,
but there is some learning curve there. So expect me, it's fine. Yeah.
I think we lost you for a few seconds there, but
okay. Yeah. No, nothing. I just say that you could do it yourself. It's not complex, and you can do it in English, thankfully. Yeah.
All right. It just might take you some time, but if you like filling government forms, go for it.
Now, I would say gauge about 3 months at least. Yeah.
All right. Well, brain damage for 3 months. Good luck, guys.
Yeah.
So I think on your second point, partnerships. From your experience, you must have seen it all. Bad breakups, lawsuits, all sorts of crazy things that can go wrong. What would be your advice on a lot of the teams that are going to expand through local partners? Hello? Hi. Yeah. Anybody still see Tanva? Okay. So hold your horses.
Hello.
We're getting some difficulty, Tanva kap. So I think your video is frozen. We can hear you again. We surely want to both see you and hear you. So we're going to give him some time to sort out. And if you could check your connections and all that, that'd be great. Okay, so he's gone and he'll be back. Folks, keep the questions coming. And okay, he's coming back. Keep the question coming. Thank you. All right.
Sorry.
Tanva, you're back.
So I think I last heard about you, the pitfalls, what to look out for partnerships
Yeah,
with
that's the deal. Like,
yeah.
what would be a good indicator of a good Thai partner? How do you
Oh
select
boy.
a partner properly? What to watch out for? Some red flags from your experience.
I would say that, when I was a young lawyer, one of my mentors was telling me, you know, um, expect expect a quarrel between partners when things go very bad, when things are exceptionally going well. Because that's either when you start blaming who's to blame for the for the bad situation you're in, or that how do we share the pie, right? Let's talk about that all over again. So I would say that it's it's important. A lot of times I've seen people are very eager to come in, and when they identify somebody that they know either have the qualifications or what they need in a partner, you must really think about the cultural and alignment, the personality, because at the end of the day, we're human beings, and that's as a lawyer, I would say, you know, that's like 90% of the dispute, the personalities. Uh, of course, it's possible that you got into a deal that's really bad for you, and at the end of the day, you didn't know you got tricked into this deal. That doesn't usually happen in an investment or a partnership. That could happen in a transaction. Somebody could sell you, like, a cargo full of like useless pieces of paper, right, instead of like face masks, right, or the fraud that's going on. But when you're looking for a partner, chances are, they it's not the fraud aspect. So you really need to think about that person. A lot of times, you need to know what they expect out of the deal, uh, and really understand why you want them and why they want you. Just because you're nice and they're nice is not enough, or there's some hazy understanding that, well, if this works well, everybody will be rich. Of course, everybody wants to invest for returns, but how realistic is their expectation? That's one thing. Do they really understand what it means and what it takes? Do they know that, hey, you're not going to be in a profitable position for 5 years, and we might ask you for more money, and after that we might go to additional VCs and you will get diluted? Do you know that will happen, right? So manage that expectation right from the front. Do they have the experience dealing with foreign partners? And that will come across very quickly. Their sensibilities, or their understanding of protocols, international protocols of how it works. Beyond a red flag, if the person is just, oh, everything is okay, just sign. Generally, it's not okay. Uh, that means you haven't really understood what they want. Um, there's a lot of management, and also don't be afraid to step out of the deal halfway. I see a lot of times, as you start to negotiate the deal with a partner, and they're perfectly good people, and halfway through you start to have that warning signs that this might not work. There are just some matters in their personality, their expectations, that might not actually work, and you might be tempted to concede some things. And I see that a lot when I help companies do that, or startups do that. And I really have to tell my clients, think very carefully. It's fine to step away. Don't be afraid to step away, even if you're like 3 days from signing the dots, right? I know it sucks, and there's a lot of relationships involved, bad taste in your mouth, and you wonder about how they would feel, how you would feel. But this is business, and you have to be able to think, if they cannot accept that explanation from a business perspective, then probably they're not people you want to work with. There might be disappointments, people getting upset, but you can live with a week of people being upset with you than years of just torment. So I would advise, that's very important. It's hard for me to tell you, what's the magic formula to find a partner. It's experience. I would advise, when you come in, don't come in as one person. because you take the cue from the crime movies that you watch, right? With the good cop, bad cop, and right. So you have different personalities to play. Don't go in and say I'm the boss. I can make all the decision. Set that expectation up front that hey, you have other partners. You are the conduit. You like this person. You really want to work with them, but it's something that the board or your partners have to deal with, and it's not all in your hands. So you manage that relationship just in case in the future you have to come back to them, right? So you don't burn the bridge, so to say. So I would say, before you go in, set the strategy, how you would approach, who takes what role. Yeah.
What about in terms of this? Like, is there any curious perk of like Thai partners and folks that you have to deal with and get in contact with that entrepreneurs from abroad, might find it very peculiar or something that they have to watch out for? Like, if this happens, this is very Thai, and this is how you deal with it.
Yeah, it's boy, I would say from experience, uh, it depends on who you're dealing with, right? If you're dealing with a counterpart who is actually high net worth and very wealthy, has successful businesses, and they are now dabbling into startup because everybody with money, with traditional businesses, they might have a chain store of noodle stores. They know nothing of, well, I wouldn't say they know nothing, but they have not done startups or tax. And they have money lying around. They say, hey, this is the next big thing. And they're smart people, right? So they can do the math about your business model. But just be aware that they might need your guidance as well in terms of what are the particulars of this type of dealings. A lot of them are a bit traditional. They would deal with hard assets. They would think in terms of very traditional business models. So you have to educate them coming in, things like who owns the IP. They might not think about that up front. They just say, get the deal doing, get the platform up and we sell things, right? And ultimately, who owns what? If you're coming and saying, actually my parent company in Singapore will own the IP, the Thai joint venture will only, service the industry. Does it align to what they think they know? Okay, so know the other party, where they're from, what's their background. Of course, if they're relatively, tech savvy and relatively Gen X, right? You can expect they might know that. But then again, you have to think about that background. Another thing that I would mention is that be wary of gatekeepers. In countries like Thailand, we are very there's a lot of monopolies around, and traditional. It's not like the US where it's almost a free market in a way. There's a lot of gatekeepers in Thailand, so be wary of people say, hey, I can get you the connection, I can get you that license, I can get you the government contracts. Yeah, they might be able, but who knows, right?
Or it can be costly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and well, well, in the US you've got the big tech, so
yeah, they're the gatekeepers, but here it's something else, right? It's like, yeah, if you want to do business in my town, can't pay respect to the godfather over here, right?
Three major families,
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
every market has that. Okay, well, I think a lot of people are considering, they've heard in the previous session, if you're going to come to Thailand, either hire a really strong country head or come and the founders have to land and set things up and maybe get one of these so-called smart visas. What's your take on that? Is that the right way to do it? And is this whole visa thing, does it actually work?
And one thing that I would say, having worked on with foreigners in Thailand, I would say our visa regime is a pain in the neck. I would admit that it's an embarrassment for all Thais. I would say even our tax department is a bit more. It's a bit better to deal with. So we expect to get a bit frustrated with our visa regime. Talk to expats who've lived in Thailand for some time, and they will tell you that just be calm. The first few times would be like a headache, and then once you get the ball rolling, you should be fine. So okay, smart visas. Yes, there are smart visas now. That's technically the government's way of trying to alleviate some pain for people coming in to get a visa. So let me just briefly set the stage. People in different countries might not have the context. So in Thailand, a visa allows you to live and to stay. Right? You come in on a visitor visa, a tourist visa, a business visa, etc., etc. It allows you to stay, but no classes of visa allows you to work. So you need a work permit, and they go hand in hand, right? So one's regulated by the Immigration Bureau, the other is with the Labor Department, and everybody protects their turf. And a lot of times the headaches comes when they start doing ping pong, right? And they say, well, you have to go there and they approve, we'll approve, and nobody tries to take any responsibility for it. Typical government bureaucracy. So we have smart visas where technically the board of investment, the BOI, will step in and say, although traditionally we would only handle visas and work permits, right? We only help with this process for promoted companies. Now with the smart visa regime, your company might not be a BOI promoted company, but if you meet certain qualifications, you can do so. What is the difference between going to the BOI for a visa and going to the Immigration Bureau? One, the BOI has a one-stop service center. So you go to a one-stop service center in the middle of town, and there is the Immigration Bureau, the BOI, the Labor Department, all in one place. So you don't need to run, 4 separate directions to get your things together. Generally, there's a shorter waiting time because there's just less qualified applicants. So that's the perk. You might be able to get a prolonged visa normally for a long-term stay visa, normally for a business visa that all of you would probably get if you're coming to work in Thailand. The general period of validity is 1 year, and you have to renew it. Using a smart visa for some categories, you can get 2 years, like a BOI. So it reduces the headache that you have to run back and forth. Now, there are 5 types of smart visas, okay? The first type, they call it type T, which is a highly skilled class. You have to be employed in an educational institution, a research institution, or government agencies, okay? Or be an arbitrator, lawyers. So these are very specific. It might not apply to everyone, okay? There is another type, the investor type. So there's 5, right? Type T, there's investor type, and there's an executive type, a startup type, okay? So now within the investor type, there is a minimum requirement of investment. So 20 million baht of investment for that individual. It must be an individual investing, not a corporate account. And you have to invest in a manufacturing or service industry using high tech. Now, who gets to decide what is high tech? That means your company in Thailand must be certified by the relevant agency in Thailand. So generally the Ministry of Digital Economy, okay? Now, the type E for executives, those are generally for multinational corporations where you have executive level C-suite persons coming in. There is a minimum salary requirement, and the company must also be involved in the field of using high technology, manufacturing or services. The last type is the type S for startups. Generally, this type, you must have a certification from the Ministry of Economy as well, that your particular type of tech is something that the government's looking for. And if you get that, then you can go for a type S smart visa. As mentioned, you can apply at a one-stop service. The process normally take about 10 days, so much less than the regular period, which could take almost a month. And if you are not in Thailand, you can apply it with the Thai consulate. So that's the smart visa regime. Now, of course, if you don't qualify, you can still go for the regular visa applications.
But you don't recommend that.
I would say that, you know, it's an experience. I've been there holding hands with clients, right? And I would say I wouldn't want to do this. You know, you're there for an entire day, just like in the line waiting on a number. You go to the counter and you say, well, this document's not right, that document is not right. Come back again. And
Okay,
yeah,
very good to know. You see the horror stories all online all the time. And the funny thing is that Thai people start to innovate on the queue before we had the automated queuing system. You leave your shoe
yeah,
in a line,
yeah.
kind of like your queue card, and then there's like long lines of shoes, and people are just like, "Oh my god, this is crazy." Okay, we got a fair bit of questions from the chat, and
Yeah, yeah.
I got one from Sharif. Shell companies to
Ah,
get all the pre-approved license. Should I buy one into one, or is that not a good idea?
you know, unlike companies in Singapore or Hong Kong or some of the offshore jurisdictions, Thailand generally doesn't have shelf companies. It's not something that we generally do. Yes, you can technically, somebody could set up, I could set up a company XYZ and just put it on the shelf and wait for people to come and buy it. But the cost of maintenance generally is not worth my time to do so. And also getting permits and licenses, you probably won't be able to do it before knowing what business you're going to do. For example, I would say that, you know, even to apply for a VAT registration in Thailand, we have a value-added tax regime. You must have an office with 4 corners. That's how the yeah, that's the thinking behind our government. I think COVID might change it, but I haven't seen anything yet. So there was, just to give you a bit background, there's a lot of fraud. People are committing tax fraud, right? Setting up like companies and just being like to filter or launder money. So the revenue department has decided that, well, we must see your physical, you know, your physical office. And for some reason they don't get the concept of just, you know, why do I need 4 walls? But they want to see, they would want to see like, you know, this area specifically for your company's signs placed there. Take a photo of it with you in the picture, just to prove if they have to go to court, something like that. So that's some of the restriction, you know, limitations that we have. Obviously, it depends on the revenue office as well. Depending on where you are set up, you know, it's a different locality office, right? That how stringent they are. But generally, that's the requirement. So I wouldn't say that you would have. It's not common. Just say it's not common to have a shelf company in Thailand. Most law firms and most corporate secretary firms do not offer that service. If someone does, you have to really check when it's set up. Has it been used before? And they're trying to resell you a company that has been a going concern, and now the owners have decided that they don't want to do business anymore. Yeah.
Interesting. Now, I guess that is a perk in Thailand, and I run a co-working space. And the funny thing is, for virtual offices, it gets really complicated. You have to actually have like a lot of signs and a lot of rooms.
Yeah.
Be able
Yeah.
to
You know.
show them that the room exists. Okay, well, I guess we've got a few other questions around hiring, ครับ คุณธันวา. For some folks that might not need a local partner to do a JV with them.
Hiring.
Yeah, sorry, we're getting
Right.
a little bit of difficulty on your end. Okay, you're back. Hiring. We might not need a local partner or do a JV, but we're looking to hire a strong country head. What's the best way to hire? What kind of contracts do we need to put them on? And is ESOP is a thing? Like, does that person need to hold equity in the OpCo? What would be your advice?
Right. It really depends, you know, what benefits you need to give them to attract them. I personally, I would stay off share participation schemes right at the offset, because you're just getting acquainted, right? unless you would want them to have some track record, and you really feel that this is somebody you really want to retain and you work well with, and you want them to essentially be a co-owner with you, right? So while ESOP and share participation schemes can be done in Thailand, uh, I, I I do not recommend them just right off the bat, unless whoever you are bringing in is actually almost an investor material, and they don't want to invest funds in it at this time. They're saying, well, I'll invest my time, and can I get shares out of it? So that's a matter of negotiation. But if you're just hiring and interviewing people off the street, I wouldn't go for an ESOP right away. With respect to hiring, generally in Thailand, we are not as restrictive as some countries with socialist background might tend to be a bit more restrictive. We Although our labor laws tend to protect the employees and favor the employees, you can contract with them at will. You can use English as employment contract. It's just that in the court of law in Thailand, everything has to be translated into Thai. Now, my recommendation is that if you have a standard template, you can use that, but try to localize it for Thai law. That's very important because our severance requirements, our minimum leave or holidays or maternity leaves are slightly different, right? And what needs to be put in, what doesn't need to be put in, and also understand that when you hire, if you want to let them go, we are not a employment at will jurisdiction like the US. So expect to pay severance. So you need to know how much reserve you need to do, how long you need. For example, the maximum probation period is 4 months, right? And within 4 months, you have to think whether this is somebody you want to work with. Otherwise, if they stay a day longer, you have to pay severance.
Great to know. And is there something that you could do really wrong with hiring that entrepreneurs should be very careful about?
Again, when you hire someone, have the probation period, it's not automatic at law. So if your contract does not say that they have a probationary period, it assumes that they become a full permanent hire and entitled severance from day one. So it's a right for you to put it in, but it's not automatic, right? So you want to have that period, that lead time coming up. Be aware that even if at the end of the probation period you say, hey, this is not somebody who you think you want to work with, you want to let them go, you don't just show up and let them go, right? There is a formal process. You need to give them prior notice in writing, and you want to document it as well, because otherwise they could sue you for wrongful termination, like discrimination or whatever, even though it's probationary. Chances are people won't. In Thailand, most people are not that litigious, and it's not worth the time to just sue you just to get like 1 month's salary, which is not that significant in Thailand. But it's still something that you need to follow the process. Your HR overseas can help oversee it, but they need to be aware of the local regulations for employment rights. Yeah.
Fascinating. I got 2 last questions. I know your time is money.
Yeah.
Contracts with governments or corporates. A lot of people are going to expand here and look for projects to hit the ground running. Any do's and don'ts? Anything to watch out for?
I would say it's really tough unless you have some tech or some lines of business where your primary clients will be government agencies, because a lot of times the government procurement process in Thailand has a lot of limitations. Firstly, they have to ensure that they have a bidding process. If a government somebody in a government walks up to you and say, hey, I can get you a contract and just sign it, be very suspicious, because no government officer, even if they're the best people in the world, okay, they're the most transparent or whatever, they have to protect themselves. They just can't sign a contract with an operator, especially a foreign operator, right? There's that process that they have to vet through. Are there Thai operators, right? Governments will try to fulfill procurement with their own domestic entities, or if there's not, there is a bidding process, right? So be aware. And one of the key requirements is a track record. Generally, there is a minimum capital of that entity and also a track record. You just can't open the company overnight and bid, right? They would say you have to be in business for 3 years. You have to have at least another government contract or some sort of contract on par at this level with another client before. So they're approaching it. They're not taking like, fresh people off the shelf. They're taking people with established records. You might be able to rely on your experience or your client records from overseas, but what that generally means is that you need to team up with a Thai entity in Thailand who meets the qualifications over here and form kind of a consortium or a JV, and that's where it comes in, right? And that's where I talk back with. I've been supplying to the Ministry of Public Health for the 5 years. Wink, wink. So you want a contract, you do it through me. That's fine. We're doing business, right? Everybody has their turf or has their value that they bring to the game. But just be very, very wary that you could easily get a government contract. I would say it's not easy unless you yourself has government backing coming in, and that's a different ball game that you're talking about.
And I think the same, in my experience, applies to corporates, which is there's a general hesitation of working with international startups that might not have a Thai speaking staff, because the corporates just don't know who to scream at or yell at or complain to when things go wrong, and they also don't have a lot of experience dealing with foreigners. So usually it's a Thai face to an international brand or a JV or some sort of partnership where there's a reseller that the corporate has an existing relationship and can trust. So, Kuntanva, are you still with us?
I'm still with you.
Okay. All right. I think a small lag. Sorry. Last one. Super last question.
Yeah.
This one would be an interesting one. Yeah. Hang in there. So, scaling from Thailand or fundraising here. People have heard that it's hard. You said it, just go and set up your company in Singapore. Is this the right place to set up the regional headquarters, or maybe Hong Kong, Singapore is a better deal? What's your advice if these people are not in the region yet or still considering?
Patriotic, I would say that Singapore is probably a better regime, partially because language, one thing, English. In Thailand, all the documents are in Thai, right? That's one thing. Second point is the ease of transacting, especially as a holding entity. The tax position is much more attractive as well. No tax on dividends, no tax on capital gain. In Thailand, there is tax, right? And trying to wire funds out with withholding tax, a lot of times your investors will scratch their head and say, what's going on? Why do I have to pay like 15%, right off the bat? So I would say Singapore is the government here, the BOI is coming up with, regional people. But personally, to be fair, I would say that you just can't match Singapore. Hong Kong in the past as well. I'm not sure if Hong Kong would still be as attractive today. Some people would be more aggressive with their tax package. They might go to an offshore entity. That is fine, but I would say that, just be wary about that, because there's a lot of suspicion, especially for tax, right, across the globe and in Thailand, when they start saying that your parent company is in the Caymans, and you're like siphoning funds off. So what's going on? So Singapore still has the credibility as a regional real financial hub and a real business presence. So I would say it's really, it's really, I would say look at that. So the structure, a lot of times they will set up a Thai company with a BOI and have the Singapore company hold 100%. And then you go and mix and match all your shares and talk about who owns what and who has how much over there. It's much simpler that way. Yeah.
On that note, we're a little bit over time, but I think everybody got the gist of it. It's a great place to do business, but it's got its caveats. And yeah. I would say that number one word is, and Sam, you changed your shirt. Thanks for having the courtesy to put on a polo. Long story short, great lawyer, does so much for you. And having the right corpsec. I've gone cheap in the past and lived to regret about it, and met a guy like Tanva, and you can sleep easy knowing that there's somebody who actually knows what he's talking about. So if there's a few things you don't go cheap on, is your corpsec and your attorney. So I hope that everybody got their questions answered, but I'll drop Tanva's LinkedIn in case you'd like to have more chats with him. And until further ado, we'd love to have you back in the future. But Tanva, thank you so much for spending the
evening. Thank you.
Quite an honor.
All right, guys. Have a good one.
Thank you, everybody, for joining the session. And we'll talk soon. Keep up all the good work in the accelerator. And if you have anything on Thailand, reach out to me, Wendy, and the rest of the Thus team. Thank you, and have a great afternoon.
Okay, guys. Bye-bye.
Thanks.